Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, that was fun, wasn't it? It really was. Praise the Lord, because that was absolutely fantastic. The atmosphere was incredible. The football was superb at times as well. And it's just the beginning. That's the most exciting part about it. Only 2 games in, the Postecoglou way has not been ingrained yet. It's probably only about 30%, 25% ingrained into these players of what they got to do. And Postecoglou always says it's not about them feeling they have to do it because he's told them to. It's about them feeling instinctively where to move, what to do, how to pass it. If we're getting that in the first home game, thank goodness. When he was out on the pitch at the end, Postecoglou, he went into the centre circle and just had this little moment where he looked around. And I half expected him to have Paul Coyte's microphone and just kind of go, gladiator style, "Are you not entertained?" just to the crowd. And I think everyone, just to a man, woman, child, would have said, yes, thank goodness, yes, finally, after years of, look, I don't want to dismiss the entire last, 4 or 5 years or so as saying that none of it was entertaining. Of course it was. But let's be honest, it was starting to get a weekly grind of matches. We knew what was coming. We knew what kind of football Spurs were going to play. And now I kind of feel like we know what kind of football Spurs are going to play. And that's a good thing because you can tell I'm absolutely energised by it. And I'm sure most people were absolutely buzzing well into the night last night. I had to write. I was doing writing to the early hours, a really, really long shift late last night writing about it. Do you know what? I didn't care one bit. The amount of times I had to write my talking points and things I do after a game previously when the football was dreadful and it was such a chore. It was a joy to be able to write about everything that happened yesterday as well, particularly second half. And I think everyone played a part. I think Postecoglou played a part. The team played a part. The fans played a part. They were magnificent, the fans, yesterday. That was the best atmosphere I think we've had at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since, I reckon, North London Derby a couple of years back. Conte's kind of the end of his first. Conte didn't even have a full season in charge, didn't he? I was trying to work out a way to say that. The end of his first season at the club. But going back to that moment with Postecoglou, it was just, I just thought it was really cool. Just watching him. Obviously, he didn't come out with the Russell Crowe gladiator line, but what he did do was he just looked around for a moment and just took it in. And actually, it made me think of a less, I don't want to say less successful, because we don't really know what's going to happen exactly with Postecoglou. We just hope it's going to be much better. But it reminded me of Nuno's first home game when he beat Man City. Obviously, a very different game, of course it was, to yesterday's match. But after that, Nuno went out onto the pitch with his family, just when everyone else had gone, and just had a little quiet, reflective moment. I'm not comparing the two. Don't worry, I'm not comparing Nuno and Postecoglou, because it was a different moment. Whereas Nuno was doing that kind of almost silently and quietly by himself with his family, Postecoglou was standing in the middle of 61,000. I've got the number somewhere down here, the attendance. 61,000 fans chanting his name. Honestly, the Spurs fan base, and he said it himself, Postecoglou, it's a bit blind faith at the moment because even they don't really know what he's going to bring yet, but they've just fallen for him. And it's what Spurs needed. They needed a figurehead that wasn't moaning about life, wasn't telling the Spurs fans how awful their club is and how much there is to do. It's a manager coming in there and just saying, I love being here. It's brilliant. Look what we can do together. And it's such a simple thing. It's such a simple way to get everyone on board. And not only that, but play the football that the Spurs fans want to see. Unleash and unlock some players that previously you just thought, what a waste. And now they're just performing at the very top of their ability, or certainly getting there. And just that moment where Postecoglou was just looking around. And for a man who, to be fair to him, he doesn't really ever think about the me. And it's very much, it will ring bells of a certain previous manager. It is a lot about the collective. He'll often say we rather than I. which again is quite different to some of the other managers. But just for a moment, he got to stand there and just take it all in and just feel like, this is a guy who has worked his way around the world to get to this point. He has had to go the hard route. He is and he's often said it himself, because of his nationality, people have maybe looked down on him and thought, well, what's Australian going to know about football, soccer? Why would he get in the Premier League? And here he's come all of this route, all the way around. So he's gone to, Japan, Greece, obviously Scotland as well, having managed in Australia, managed the national team at all different levels. I mean, just to put a little bit of context on it, Postecoglou, it's very fitting that his first home Premier League game was against Man United, because he played South Melbourne. He managed South Melbourne against Manchester United in the Club World Cup in 2000. 23 years ago, he was up against Manchester United. So it was incredibly fitting that his first home Premier League game was this game of all. So he looked around and he it was a bit of a smile. And I just love the fact that his guard dropped ever so slightly as he was walking off, and he looked across, and he obviously must have seen his family, friends. I think he had a lot of friends there. He was joking that I think quite a few of his friends were actually Man U fans, so he got a bit of one over on them as well. But I think he saw up whether it was his family, friends, or all of the above, and he just gave the biggest grin, wave, and pumped his fist. And it was just a moment. The kind of, I wouldn't say a mask, because he's a very straight talking guy, but almost like he just allowed himself to enjoy it for a moment, like everyone else was in the stadium. And like I say, this is definitely not the end of a long journey, because I feel like there's a lot more to come, but just a moment where I hope that evening he was able to go home and just, even if it wasn't him patting himself on the back, but just his family saying, right, you're here, you've done it, you've got where you want to be. Now, obviously, you can do what you've always wanted to do and create something special in the biggest league in the world. This is why when you hear me talk about like Harry Kane and how much I love Harry Kane, but now he obviously is off in the Bundesliga, it's just no Premier League. It's just not. The Premier League is the biggest. And I know anyone outside the Premier League will say that's such a, xenophobic, egotistical thing about anyone that's within the Premier League, covering the Premier League, a fan of the Premier League, whatever you want to say, but I think it is. I think it just is, and I think the stats bear that out as well, and the viewership and everything. And what's actually really also interesting, and I didn't realise this until after the game, I think the BBC found this stat, was that win yesterday extended a remarkable unbeaten run for Postecoglou in home league matches. He has not lost a league match at home in 49 games. It was incredible. I didn't realise just how good that was. So that's across his time at Yokohama F. Marinos, Celtic, and now Spurs. He's won 41 of those matches and drawn 8. His last home league defeat was in November 2020 with Yokohama against Kashima Antlers in the J1 League. So the next game at home will be his, well, hopefully, if he avoids defeat, will be his 50th. But biggest of all, really, he brought Spurs fans something that's almost been unthinkable. Like I say, happiness, enjoyment, just joy after watching a performance and watching the way Spurs went about it and tearing apart Man U in that second half. Look, first half, absolutely rode their luck a little bit, had the penalty appeal, which there's differing opinions on that. There's talk about the proximity rule that's come in now, that maybe it was close enough that Romero couldn't really have done much about it. I'd argue his arm was up in an unnatural position anyway, so I don't know whether that must not negate it, otherwise VAR would have given it, because VAR is absolutely infallible right now. But yeah, it was, like I said earlier, it was exhilarating. The whole performance overall was exhausting. And just lots of people, I think, probably went home with like a delirious smile on their face. Even in the press conference room while we were waiting, one of the journos said, while we were waiting for Ten Hag and Postecoglou to come out, it's like, is anyone else knackered? What a game to kind of report on as well. And it's true. It's true. We were knackered, but in a good way. And when I talk about that first half, and I think Postecoglou, definitely, I've got some quotes, he referred to it as, there's a real case of how do I put this? I think it's a case of the youth of the squad. Don't forget half of the outfield players yesterday, you had two 20-year-olds, 22-year-old, and two 23-year-olds. 5 of those 10 outfield players that started the game. And only Sonny was the only player over 30. It was a young team. I think with the incredible atmosphere and the noise of the game, there was a few nerves early on. And that contributed, I think, to some of the stuttering little bits of football. It's so funny sitting there with listening to the fans' voices as they're trying to adapt to this new kind of football. We had this bloke behind the press conference who is, you get the odd occasional bellower, as we call them. There's someone that shouts, often rubbish opinions, but they are their opinions and they've got every right to them. And the one yesterday that was continuously shouted was, "Just boot it!" And it was like, have you been paying any attention? Have you been paying any attention to exactly what Postecoglou football is all about? He does not want them to boot it out. He doesn't. Honestly, we wouldn't have all of those moments throughout the game where we're like, "Whoa," when they're kind of trying to pass around the press. And you know what? On the whole, they did it really well as well. Yeah, like I said, there was some nervy moments early on. And the trouble is, it's really going to create this difficult kind of change in mindset that needs to happen because fans, obviously, and you can hear the collective groan when a player passes the opposition. We're just drilled to do that. As journalists as well, we make that noise. But the Postecoglou way, he wants Spurs players to do that. He wants his players to risk and try to get that ball out because if you can beat the press, bang, there's suddenly space behind. And you saw it countless times yesterday with the way that Spurs were suddenly able to break forward. But yeah, it would be interesting to see whether the fans can ever get away from that. And as journalists as well, can we get away from the fact that when we kind of groan like, oh, and the trouble is every time we groan collectively at a mistake and giving the ball away, that puts pressure on the player not to do the same thing next time, whereas Postecoglou wants them instinctively to do exactly the same kind of action, but obviously just get it right. So yeah, I find all that fascinating. But this guy, oh my goodness, he was doing it so many times, and it was like you just kind of hope that within 3 to 6 months' time, he won't be shouting, "Boot it out." He'll be shouting, "Play it out," or something like that. Probably not, but that's my dream. I will listen out for him. We were sat in a slightly different seat to our regular seats, so maybe I won't hear him too much in the future. Some stats for you. Spurs, 427 passes. 85% of them successful, and they passed almost 100 more than Man United. Man U only had 44% of the possession on the day. United did have more shots, 22 to Spurs 17, but both sides had 6 on target. And I would say quite a few of the United efforts were quite kind of wild ones. Guglielmo Vicario did have a couple of kind of good saves to make. I wouldn't say he was peppered, his goal. He wasn't lots of saves he had to make, but he did enough, and we'll talk about Vic, as he's called by Postecoglou, and absolutely dispelling really daft premature judgments of him, which I spoke about last week. Why we don't rush to judgment after one game of football. Just before we get into the match itself, ahead of the game, obviously, I went out with some fellow journalists. We went out to also cover the protest that was gone outside. There was about 300 Spurs fans, I'd say, out there, and more kind of stopped and kind of gathered around it as well. So it was really well attended, I felt. It was organised, if you're not aware, by the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust against the increase in matchday ticket prices, which you've heard me spoken about before on here, and it's just all getting mad, football it is, and it's not a great look for Spurs chucking those up whatsoever, because just, families and individuals are just finding themselves just getting more and more priced out of attending games that they love. And look, I know Spurs will say, or people will say, oh, but the stadium will still be full. But the problem is it's going to be full more with people just, I guess, trying to go out for a day out, and they will save up for these one-off things, and they may not be regular fans. It could be whatever, and I do think that harms the atmosphere rather than having family goes. And most of all, you're losing that next generation as well of fans that can go. So yeah, it was a very worthwhile kind of demonstration outside. I popped out there and took some videos and photos, which I put on my Twitter feed, and it went on our website as well, and saw a few familiar faces. Little shout out to Joanne and Jan. I saw both out there. I'm always quite good at remembering the people that are always really nice on social media. That's always my way. If anyone's kind of unpleasant, I just kind of forget them, and I probably don't even remember if they do it again. Whereas when people are always very pleasant and engaged with a really nice dialogue, and sometimes I'll meet them kind of at games and stuff, and they're always perfectly pleasant, and I'll always remember them. You always remember the nice people in life. That's the way life should be, I think. But I think the good thing about the demonstration as well, obviously apart from the fact that it was a peaceful one, nothing was out of hand about it. It was just really well organised. It was structured. It had a really clear message, and I think that's why it got a lot of people behind it as well. Look, whether it ends up doing anything or I don't know, but what I do think it did was it certainly brought attention to the subject, and we certainly all mentioned it in our staff. My talking points had it all in there right near the top. I know I had various journalists from some of the national organisations were coming to me and asking about various stats and little bits and pieces that I've covered in the past. I did a piece with Antula from the Trust, who's absolutely on it when it comes to all of the ticketing stuff. I think that's actually her role within the Trust, kind of being very much on all that sort of stuff and being kind of hot on the subject. And yeah, because I obviously had a lot of stats and bits and pieces and the prices and the increases and stuff, and I was able to share that with them as well. And yeah, it was just really well organised, and it's just done in a different way. You've heard me say this in the past about the different groups of Spurs fans trying to get what they want at the moment, and there's right ways to go about it and there's wrong ways to go about it. And I'm not saying that the people that are going about things in the wrong way have got any less valid opinions. Absolutely not. But what I do think is you, as I've said this before, you want to inspire people to gather behind you and your cause. In a weird way, it's, I suppose, kind of similar to what Postecoglou's doing in terms of trying to gather the Spurs fans and the players and everyone behind him and his ideas. I guess on a smaller scale, or whatever kind of scale you want to call it, it's the same when you're trying to get a message across. If you kind of aggressive and shout people down or are genuinely just unpleasant about it, it's not going to get you anywhere, and people are not going to want to be associated with that message. It actually puts people off. Whereas I felt that the way this was done was structured well, and I think that's why it got a good response. George Sessions from PA and we went up also afterwards to a higher kind of vantage point to look down. I took a photo, and you could see it was quite a sprawling. There was quite a few people, and there was more gathering in, and it's a very worthy cause. It is, because matchday ticket prices are just ridiculous. It is. It's become like a really expensive day out rather than a hobby and a pastime now. It's going to become more like going to, I guess, like a concert or something like that, rather than a weekly ritual, and that's the saddest thing about it. But yeah, we shall see if it does any good. I think one of the most important things for me about it as well was that the Trust made it very clear that they would protest outside the stadium about this issue, but as soon as they stepped inside the stadium, would fully support the team and Ange Postecoglou. And that was huge, because I think if there'd been any sense of coming in there and being angry about the matchday ticket prices, which understandably anger, I do understand it whatsoever, but I think if they took that mood into the stadium, I think I said it at the end of the last video about trying to differentiate between being angry with the owners, angry with the chairman, angry with whoever make the decision to increase the prices, the tickets, or whatever you want to be angry with them, but also separating that from the fact of supporting the actual team on the pitch and the manager. And that was done to perfection, I felt, yesterday. Like I said, the atmosphere was incredible. It was like a real, almost like an electricity to it. It was bubbling. It was kind of just it boiled over in a good way, and you just felt like kind of goosebumps at times with some of the noise. Some of us journalists were struggling to even talk to each other to discuss little who put that cross in, who played that pass, because it was that noisy. It was from start to finish as well. 61,910 people inside the stadium, and Postecoglou and his players gave them something in return. They gave them quite a lot in return as well. And Postecoglou just gives them something that they can kind of believe in again. He really does. I just love the fact that there's all the chaos and the drama that always happens around Tottenham Hotspur, and he just kind of stepped over it like it's something that's on the street that's been left unpleasantly. And he just steps over it and just like, yeah, okay, right, well, that's nothing to do with me. Crack on. Let's crack on now and follow me. I'm going to take you to where we need to go. And if you think about it, this is just over a week since the club sold Harry Kane, the greatest ever goal scorer. Could you imagine a scene of such kind of togetherness and happiness all formed around another man in a day? Because let's be honest, Kane was always the person that everyone within the club and outside the club, the fans, would just kind of load their hopes and dreams onto his shoulders pretty much. But now they've got Postecoglou, who is absolutely happy for that load to be whacked on his shoulders and take it all. And actually, when he was asked about that moment in the centre circle, he said, you want to feel that moment, because I've always said, to me, I love what football does to people, particularly in that moment, in those kind of moments. Take a moment to think about the 60,000 here, or the ones who are watching at home, because they'll be smiling for the rest of the week. I love that it does that, this game. For me, that moment is just about appreciating that I'm pretty blessed to be doing what I'm doing, being in the middle of a stadium, leading a fantastic football club, and then you start to think about next week, mate. This is it. I've probably said this a number of times when Spurs were doing their managerial search. It was very much a case of, I just wanted to... I think I personally wanted a manager who just appreciated the fact that they were at Tottenham Hotspur and felt privileged to be at Tottenham Hotspur. And so for him, after his first home game, to say that he feels blessed leading a fantastic football club, it's just music to my ears. It's what we all want to hear. We don't want to kind of hear that Tottenham Hotspur are these kind of cast-offs, that, these kind of, this thing that people will take on as a bit of a project to maybe get themselves back up the ladder or something. For Postecoglou, it's, like I said earlier, it's a real realisation of a dream for him. And you can feel that. And you can feel that he wants to build a legacy at Spurs. And we were discussing this, actually, ahead of the game in the press conference on Friday, that actually, when you look at Postecoglou's record, he doesn't actually stay at clubs for long. But kind of we felt that with him, it's almost more, and this is with no disrespect to the other clubs, almost like a bit of a stepping stone career, like I say, of trying to get to the promised land, the Premier League and Europe, I guess, to begin with, and now the Premier League. And you kind of feel like he absolutely, I don't know why to quote Marx, doesn't really need to be quoted, a big if he can kind of grow something or grow what he wants at Tottenham Hotspur and make it happen, he could stick around for a long time. I know he is 57 now, but he absolutely could create a bit of a dynasty at Tottenham Hotspur. But again, it's early days. I can't believe I'm already saying dynasty after one home game, 2 games technically. But I just get that. That's what I mean more about the man than that's my feeling. It's more that I feel like it would be a place where he could put down roots, because quite frankly, if it were to work how he wants it to work, he can create a football club that can go as far as he wants it to be. But no, don't worry. I'm not. I can just imagine people going, now, a dynasty after one game or one home game? Don't worry. I mean more about how I think he'll feel about long term, and not to worry maybe with him about the fact that his earlier clubs had been slightly different amount of times that he was there. So yeah, And the fans are already dreaming of next week, and I think the week after that as well. I saw loads of the cork hats, the Australian hats, kangaroos, inflatable kangaroos being waved. Tadira's to didgeridoo, all of this sort of stuff. Very much, I feel like they've just embraced the whole culture of him as well. And whereas maybe elsewhere he's felt his nationality maybe has hindered him, I think he said that himself, it's kind of being celebrated at Spurs right now. And that's great. That's great for him. Absolutely brilliant for him. So let's dig into the team. I think we have to start with the midfield, because the midfield for me, I know Spurs kept a clean sheet, and I've got lots of positive stuff to say about the defence. But midfield for me was where it was at. That was where, especially second half, Spurs bossed that midfield. Even just looking at the three players compared to the Man U three. So Man U paid out a combined £172 million for Casemiro, Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes. And I really like Mason Mount. I genuinely forgot he was playing. And that is really not meant to be disrespectful. I genuinely forgot he was playing. I don't know whether it's because he's got slightly different hair colour at the moment. I don't know. I think he's got blonde hair at the moment. Or I'm mixing up with Garnacho. But ultimately, I actually kind of was like, oh, yeah, Mason Mount is playing today. Because, and I've got the numbers later on when we talk about some of the other players, he touched the ball so few times, Mason Mount. He really had such a small impact on the game. And so £172 million for those three players, very experienced internationals. Spurs put together Pape Matar, Yves Bissouma and James Maddison for £100 million less. And that's not to say that's the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it, whatever. And obviously you could argue Bissouma and Maddison were both helped by the fact that they were in the final year of their contracts, but it just shows you, I kind of think that it's not always about what you spend. It's about how you spend it and who you spend it on and getting the right fit. And that, again, I think I said this in the last video, has been always my biggest gripe with Tottenham Hotspur, is that I think they've probably spent more than people realise on players over the years, but they've just spent it on the wrong players at the wrong times as well. Whereas when they get it right, it can be quite spectacularly right. And that's the most frustrating part of it. And maybe that's the same for all clubs. But ironically as well, is the cheapest of the lot, Pape Matar, who looked probably like being the biggest bargain of all six of those midfielders. So if you're not aware of Pape's background, 20 years old, signed for about just under £15 million, summer of 2021, loaned back to Metz, which I said at the time, I think it's really come to pass. Going back on loan for what was a really difficult season where Metz were battling against relegation and ultimately did suffer relegation, was a huge kind of year for him, because he started the majority of their games and he was just kind of understanding, I guess, the lessons he was learning and needing to fight, work, deal with the pressure of relegation, and also carrying a fan base's hopes kind of in your hands and their dreams of staying up. And obviously he didn't, but his performances, certainly towards the end of the campaign as well, really gave them a little chance towards the end, and ultimately it wasn't to be, but I do think that prepared him a lot for whatever was to come next. Obviously, we know what happened in the following year. Rocked up at Spurs. Conte was impressed by his energy and his technique, but mainly after the World Cup. He returned a little bit early, Pape Matar, from the World Cup, and worked really hard, and that kind of led to him getting that performance against that start against AC Milan alongside Ola Skip when they had some injury and suspension issues, and it was just so weird. He was fantastic that night, Sarr. Played 90 minutes, was dominant, and then just seemed to vanish from Conte's thinking. I don't know whether Conte just reverted to the safe, as maybe is something that he would do, but he just kind of got the odd minute here and there towards the end of the season, and it was very strange because, well, yesterday showed you exactly why it was very strange. And I think the fact that Conte likes to play it safe, you've got someone in Postecoglou who wants anything but the safe route, the safe option. That is not what he did. He does. I mean, even my predicted team, I think I am going to adjust my mindset as well, because I keep going in my predicted team for maybe more experienced options in certain places. And it's just not how his thinking is. He's very much of the idea of, doesn't matter how young you are, if you're ready, you play. And he's been proved right in the first 2 games as well with some of his decisions over the young players. And he just wanted to see how Sarr did in a big match. And he didn't disappoint. He had 5 shots on goal, 2 on target, 1 key pass from his 36 passes with an 86.1% accuracy. Made 2 crunching tackles, which were brilliant. Both of them were so well timed and really raised the crowd even more. He won 1 aerial duel and he had that 1 low cross that deflected up onto the right hand post. But most importantly, he scored his first ever goal for Tottenham Hotspur. And it kind of epitomised nicely the energy and ability he's got because he raced into the box. It was a really good run, completely undetected, and he just lashed the ball home on the half volley. I've watched it so many times because I love not only the movement, it's Decky's cross, gets deflected slightly up in the air, and he's just there perfectly drilling it home at the back. And I just love not only that, but the noise from the fans. The South Stand right behind it erupts. And obviously the rest of the ground as well. It was so loud around us. Fans went wild. His teammates were absolutely delighted for him. He's a very popular guy in the squad. He's like, I don't want to kind of sound patronising, but he's almost like the little kid of the squad, even though there are younger players than him. But you can just see the way they treat him. You'll see players go over to him and like, get him in a headlock, ruffle his hair, all this sort of silly stuff. And you probably saw, I think he and Richarlison at the end were having a little bit like a squabble on the bench. And that's kind of how they all look at him. And Basuma and Son have really taken him under their wing as well at different kind of points. And I just think it was really nice as well that Spurs have waited a little while to see another young, attacking, exciting midfielder emerge as a potential star in the centre of the pitch. And I felt it was entirely fitting that the last man who was probably that kind of player for Tottenham, Dele Alli, was there yesterday. We realised he was only sitting a few rows behind us in the press seats. He was there with Eric Dyer. I don't know whether Eric had invited him as a guest in the box or whatever it was, but it was so lovely to see him. And the love he got from the fans that turned and realised he was there was amazing. It was brilliant. And Dele would have absolutely approved of that run that Sarr made to score the goal because it's exactly the same that Dele would do week in, week out for Tottenham when he was at his prime. There was so much love for him. There were chants. I could hear them in the concourse. There was supposed to be a chant around 20 minutes in the match. Unless it happened in pockets, I didn't hear it, but I think it's really difficult. I don't want to kind of it's very difficult to know whether those things that are planned sometimes will happen because sometimes a moment in the game can completely distract everyone, and there may have been a big moment in front of goal in the 20th minute, but he knew he was loved. It doesn't matter. He knew he was loved, or he is loved, Dele, and everyone just wants to see him back out on the pitch doing what he does best, and hopefully that will come sooner rather than later for him. And it feels like for Sarr, this is very much his journey is now really beginning with Tottenham. He's showing everyone what he can do. He's getting the attention of everyone. He's scored his first goal for the football club in the Premier League. And he's got a manager that's brave enough to back him over much older teammates. You know, he got in there ahead of Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. We're still to find out what happens with Højbjerg. But with Sarr, he had no qualms. I asked him, Postecoglou, about him afterwards as one of my questions. And he said... he was brilliant. He's been great from the moment I arrived. He's got a great energy about him, but he's got quality there too. He's one of those midfielders who causes the opposition real problems because whether it's him running with the ball or without the ball, he runs forward, he runs aggressively, and he disrupts the opposition. He's just got a great temperament for a young guy, so I'm really pleased for him. I saw some Spurs fans joking on social media afterwards that if Sarr played for Brighton, he'd already be a £100 million midfielder. Hands off Chelsea. You're not having Pape Matar. But yeah, he was superb, and I thought Basuma again was brilliant alongside him. He really is becoming the fulcrum of this side. Obviously, he got man of the match in the end. I would say it was very close for me between the two, but I can understand why Basuma got it. He just, look, he's definitely gives me Dembele vibes. He really does. Absolutely does. Strength on the ball. The opposition can't get anywhere near him. I also feel he's probably more dangerous around the opposition box than Dembele was. There's a few times when he was able to kind of dribble into the edge of the area. If he can get his shooting right, I think he'll kind of chip in with a few goals as well this season. I think his fitness isn't quite there yet. The only thing I would say still to come is his fitness, purely because of the role that he'll have to perform as that number 6. There's a few times when he will be caught up the pitch, and he will track back. It will just take him that little bit longer, and maybe it's him kind of managing his energy at this part of the season until he really has his fitness up and running. But look, don't get me wrong, that doesn't distract from his performance, and even the defensive side. I've got his stats: 5 tackles, 1 interception, 3 clearances, and 1 block of goal-bound United shot. And he's just really in a great place right now in every sense of that phrase. He's so happy. His enthusiasm is infectious behind the scenes as well. You might have seen as he was going off the pitch after the players' little lap of appreciation they did for the fans, he was dancing off the pitch. It was terrific. And, I've told you previously, Postecoglou's asked him to take on a more kind of leadership, inspiring role for the younger players. And you could see him, he grabbed Sarr after the game and he kind of had a word in his ear. Whatever he was saying, whether it was encouragement or just words of calm, I don't know. But he is working on that side of thing. And I've spoken to a lot of the other young players. Alfie Devine told me that he does, Basuma, he really is making a point of trying to talk to and encourage the younger players to kind of come along. And in a team that, like I said earlier, is so young, average age, it's got to be around the 24-year-old mark. And to have Basuma who's 26, just that little bit older and more experienced, he can just influence. It's the only way to say it. He can have his kind of say around them, and of course, you can only look back and think, why was he not the player he was under Conte last season? We know the system is partly to do with it, and just the fact that Conte was kind of not happy early on about, I guess, him taking on his instructions, taking on the defensive side of the game. But we're seeing the best side of Basuma now. And it just took Postecoglou to come in to really unlock it all. And Basuma loves Postecoglou. There's a lot of people that are kind of in the game that he's worked with, Postecoglou, that are players that are kind of scared of him and a little bit intimidated by him. Basuma is not. This is the quote he said about him after the game. He's more open. He's very calm and talks a lot with his players. He's like a friend, a dad, an uncle. He's everything. He plays all of these roles. He's very chill. He's relaxed, never putting pressure on his players. He just tries to tell us what he wants. For me, he's an amazing person and an amazing coach as well. And that's one of those relationships that could end up being absolutely defining for Tottenham this season, because Basuma can be a superstar in that Spurs midfield with Super Sarr. And Postecoglou is, he's going to get his manifestation of everything he wants on that pitch in Basuma, because Basuma will take risks. Basuma will try things. Basuma will dribble with the ball. He will look to get Spurs on the offensive as quickly as possible. And, fingers crossed, steer clear of injury and get all that working. It's going to be superb. And so if we're saying that Basuma is the new Dembele, then I think we have to say that James Maddison is the new Eriksen, which was somewhat fitting, as Christian Eriksen was there in attendance. Got a good reception down in front of us when he warmed up in the first half. What I really like about Maddison is he's very exciting for me. I love watching him play. Other than the fact that it's just glorious to see a really creative player who can put the ball on a sixpence for anyone, I also really like his dribbling. I'm going to make another lofty comparison, but his dribbling reminds me slightly of the gait and the style that Paul Gascoigne used to have, when you kind of almost felt like he wasn't in control of the ball, but nobody could actually get the ball, and he was just suddenly motored away. There was a really lovely example when he went through the centre of the pitch from his own penalty area at one point, Maddison, and he does it so much. I must admit, I felt I'd seen quite a lot of Maddison, but I didn't realise how quick his feet are, and how that's the beauty and the unpredictability of him, that in one moment he can pin that ball and ping it straight onto someone's head or at their feet, but also the defender doesn't know. He may just dribble around you. I'm really, really excited about Maddison. And, he also, it was him that played out the ball to Perisic in the build-up to the second goal as well. And, he just looks like a player that's loving life at Spurs. And he just looks like he's made for Spurs life as well. Just the shirt. it fit. Obviously it fits in, but you know what I mean. He kind of feels like a Spurs. I think I saw today him trying to tell people that no, I definitely wasn't a gooner and all this sort of stuff. He just really embraced himself, and it's quite. I like the laddie kind of version of his social media, and how much is him, how much is people that do his social media, I don't know, but he's absolutely getting it on point, whoever's doing it right now. And Postecoglou raved about him again. He said he's been brilliant, he's been outstanding. I think we got him at a brilliant time because he's always been a brilliant footballer, but where he is in his life, he's really come in with this desire and ambition to be successful. You need those kind of characters because we've got a young group and he doesn't have any baggage in this club at all. He's come in with fresh eyes and just said, well, it's a massive club with a great stadium, great training facilities. We've got nothing to have our heads down for. Let's go. I thought he and Sonny were really good today, just leading the young boys. And I think that baggage comment is massive. It's true. There's so many players at Spurs that have just been beaten down by previous regimes, what's happened at the club, the Spursy tag, whatever you want to call it. And I think Maddison is just one of those players that's come in and thought, what are you all moping about? We can absolutely smash this. And it's absolutely evident in everything he does. There was a downside. After the match, journalists in the mix zone. If you're not aware of the mix zone is, it's kind of the clues in the title. It's where journalists and players can kind of slightly mix. They're behind a barrier, but the players have to come through there to leave the stadium. So journalists will try and grab a couple of them to try and get an interview with after the game. And they saw Maddison come through with a protective boot on his right foot and on crutches, moving pretty sharpishly on them. And he was asked whether he was okay, and he said it wasn't anything serious. It was just a precautionary measure. We shall see what happens next. Obviously, with that, he played all 99 minutes that there were on the pitch. He walked off absolutely fine. I actually was watching back. There was footage of him coming off the pitch, and he seemed to be moving absolutely fine. But I guess when the adrenaline wears off, you kind of start to feel the pains and aches and everything. And we'll see. Every time you always talk to football clubs about injuries and scans, they always say you've got to wait 24 hours to 48 hours for as much as the swelling to subside as possible so you can get an accurate read on any scan. So we shall see whether it is truly nothing serious for him. I really hope it isn't because, like I say, he's made a huge impact on Spurs and everything they do creatively goes through him. And we want to see him playing against Bournemouth next weekend as well. If he's not, then you presume Lo Celso would probably come in and play that role. I think I kind of missed him off when I spoke about him briefly, Lo Celso, last week, but I didn't actually really mention him in terms of being almost like the backup, the playmaker backup, I guess. Slightly different kind of player, but still could provide that sort of stuff if required. He does it on the left of a midfield three for Argentina, so there's no reason he can't do it for Spurs. And I still feel like Postecoglou could do with getting a bit more creativity through the door, and I'm sure he'll want that as well before the transfer window closes. So that's midfield. Onto the defence. Don't worry, we're going to cover everything. I apologise if this is a long one, but I'm trying to talk as quickly as possible and get everything in there. Sorry, I was just looking at people. Chelsea fans getting very upset with Pochettino already. I guess not everyone can get their team playing in the way they want within 2 matches. No, that's unfair. We know what Pochettino will do. I still think he'll do very well with Chelsea. But yeah, it's just the way football works sometimes as well. There's so many chants going around. I keep fligging around, people sending me various Postecoglou different chants. There are so many different ones going around. I don't think I've ever seen a manager taken to as quickly as Spurs fans have with Pochettino. I genuinely trying to think. I think everyone... Conte had a strong start, but I don't know if they took to him quite to this degree of almost like adoration straight away. Like you said, it's quite early. It really is. With not too much of a sample size, but hey, it's just nice for everyone to be happy together for a change. We've had a lot of unhappiness at Tottenham Hotspur. So on the defence, it was a good day, I think, for people proving some of the doubters wrong. And myself included in some of that. Certainly not for Vicario, because you knew my thoughts on Vicario last week. I thought people were overreacting to a goalkeeper being stuck behind a brand new defence that even changed 11 minutes into the game and not really knowing how much they would come out, go in, when they would move, when he needed to rush out, when he had to stay on his goal line. And from listening to some of the players talk after the game, it sounds like they've had a real week of drilling that defence on how to play. And it was probably I was trying to think, is that the fastest back four that Spurs have had in many, many years? I know we've had the likes of Walker and Rose on the sides, but obviously they had Alderweireld and Vertonghen, who weren't speed merchants in the middle. I'm trying to think, has there ever been a faster back four as a whole? Because that's the point. They kind of need that. This is why, you worry for someone like Eric Dyer if he is ever going to really have any more kind of future at Tottenham Hotspur because of that. Because the opposition way to get around Spurs is to obviously, one aspect is to try to break them with the press, to try and make them make mistakes. But ultimately, Spurs are being trained and geared to try and play around that press. So the other way you get around it is you knock the ball long down the flanks or you knock it over the top. And so Spurs with their high line have to have fast players able to know when to suddenly switch back, turn in, and that's what they've been training them in this week. And that's something they'll only hopefully get better and better at. But when it comes to Vicario, I think a lot of it was fueled by David Raya going to Arsenal. Still not sure I 100% understand that move, but doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with us anymore. And I think some Spurs fans just kind of got upset that he'd gone there, so took it out almost on Vicario as, he's the cheap option, he's not good enough. And it was based on the Brentford match. And maybe some pre-season games where he didn't really have much to do other than point blank shots at him that weren't, not many keepers would have saved anyway. And you know what? I felt he was superb. I actually undermarked him. It's not often I look back on my marks and think, oh, I undermarked him. I gave him a 7 and I wish I'd given him an 8. I thought he was such a calm, composed and controlling presence in his area. I felt he made one really low. It was a good save. It wasn't. I don't think people realise quite how good it was. It was a reflex save from Rashford early on when he kind of got a wrist up to save it. He made a few good kind of more eye-catching saves from Casemiro's header. Varane header that was later flagged offside, but was still a very good save. I think there was another one he made as well. Like I say, it wasn't a massive, loads of saves he had to make, but what he did was very good. And he was in control of his area, plucking balls out of the air as well. And even the aspect, I think, that, is something that he's going to have to work on because it's something that he wasn't required to do at Empoli so much, which is the short passing under pressure. I felt he did that very well as well yesterday. And, like I said, Postecoglou calls him Vic, which makes him sound like a little bit of an old boy in the team. I felt he kind of needed that display in the clean sheet, not so much to convince himself, but just to remind everyone else. This was one of the best goalkeepers in Serie A last season. He's not just some kind of cheapo randomer they've plucked out of the air as a bit of a punt, he might work for us. He was a very good goalkeeper in Serie A for the last couple of years. He's been so highly praised by some of the best goalkeepers in Italy, for what he's done. He was in the Italian national squad. This is no fluke that he has rocked up at Tottenham Hotspur. And I genuinely think he's a really fascinating character, having interviewed him. He's a really good guy, a really strong moral core to him as well. Just have a little look up about looking after the Ukrainian family, that back in his family home and everything about him. And he's a communicator, and he will grow as well as a goalkeeper in the Premier League. And the hope is that, he will end up being the next long-term kind of Lloris type in being at the club for a while. Postecoglou said about him afterwards, the lads were great, dominated most of the second half. We had to do some defending. Vic made a couple of excellent saves. Ideally, you don't want to see that, but it's brilliant for him because it gives him confidence as well. And it did. And then there was Pedro Porro. I must admit, I saw his name on a team sheet and I was like, ooh, that's an attacking move. That is a big kind of call to. I thought Emerson had a few struggles down his flank at times with the pace that came at him. But I obviously scored a goal and I thought he did okay on the whole. But I didn't think he did enough to kind of come out of the team. And Postecoglou said that later. I don't know if I've got it in a quote coming up, that Skippy and Emerson came out of the team but didn't really do anything wrong. He just wanted to see how other players worked within his system in such a game. And Porro was one of them. And obviously there's been doubts about myself as well, about Porro's defensive side of the game. And in pre-season, I felt that quite a few of the goals came from areas that maybe he should have been covering. And just looking at him in that lineup, it suddenly looked like such an open kind of system to be attacked by United. And, how would he handle the likes of Garnacho and later on Sancho? Because, he's adjusting. He's adjusting from years of being a wing-back to come back to try to be a right-back. He answered them with aplomb. I would say that was his best defensive performance for Tottenham Hotspur since he arrived. I don't think... Excuse me, I think there's been other games where he's been an attacking force, he's scored goals, put in terrific crosses, but I actually think from a defensive point of view, he was near faultless yesterday. He was so good, Pedro Porro. He mopped up everything. He had 1 tackle, 1 interception, 3 clearances, 1 block shot. He raced up and down the pitch. He had that kind of shot. He did a lovely slice across it, and it hit the woodwork. Made 1 key pass in the build-up to Sarr's goal as well. It was him that put Kulusevski away. Had 1 successful dribble as well. And actually, an interview we did with Pedro Porro, funny enough, at Perth Zoo. We've only just kind of released it, and it actually was really well timed. It wasn't intentional, but it ended up being really well timed because he played. It was just one of those interviews. We had so many from the tour that it took a little while to get out there. And he told us that Postecoglou, we asked him whether Postecoglou, I think it was I asked him whether he saw him as a winger or a right back, which was the area he was going to go. And he said, my position will be as a defender, but the system is different and I'm happy with whatever comes. And when he was asked, is it that big a difference between a wing back and a right back? He said, yes and no. It's different. Being a right wing back is like a winger, but I tried to adapt to that position. But it's still different when you're attacking because as a right back, you have to surprise the opposition. You just have to get into the habit of defending. I've gone forward since I've been a professional. So in coming back, it's always a bit more challenging, but I'll keep on trying. And also there's the inverted fullback system under Postecoglou, which we'll see the right backs or left backs come inside into the pitch as a central midfielder of sorts at times as well to add extra numbers. And on that, he said, it's a different way and new ideas, but I like that type of game because you can get on the ball a lot and pass it around. Still, I feel comfortable working on defence, which is very important and will be important going forward. Both things are important. And he and Destiny Udogie, I felt, look really comfortable coming inside. They're very comfortable on the ball. They're very good with it. They can pass. They can move out of awkward tight situations. And I think they lend themselves really nicely to that setup. And, Postecoglou set out on the tour. We kind of, he said that he hopes that he could use both in the back four. I just don't think we expected it to be that quickly. It really did come quite quickly. So I'm just trying to think if I've got the quotes here. I might have the quotes that he said back then. Oh, that's it. If you're asking me if those two can play at fullback, yeah, absolutely. This is Udogie and Porro. I would love them to play fullback. And the good thing is that's the profile of all our fullbacks. I love that they're all very good technically, very good going forward, and that's the way we want to play it. I'm excited by both of their potential. Because, to dare is to do. It's the Tottenham motto. It is absolutely reflected in Postecoglou and his willingness to take risks with his lineups. He shows no fear in putting young players in there as well. If Spurs were, let's be honest, if Spurs were looking for the polar opposite of Antonio Conte, they found him. And hopefully he's not the polar opposite in terms of trophies because his career does not suggest that at all thus far. He's won them everywhere he's gone, like Conte has. It's now about, I guess, a different stage and being able to do the same in the Premier League and Tottenham. Talking of Udogie, I thought he was superb again. It just makes a mockery of the fact that he's 20 years old. And also, we always say, and I kind of try to preach patience to people, that especially foreign players coming in, you've got to take... The adaptation periods can be so different and it can take time to adjust to a new culture, a new league, new systems, whatever you want to call it. But Udogi's just making a mockery of all of that. He's like, yeah, shut up, Gold, whatever. I'm just going to come here and I'm going to smash it from day one. And he's been so good. His stats, 3 clearances, 1 tackle, 1 shot on target, 1 key pass, 2 successful dribbles. His partnership with Sonny is growing so quickly. It's a really good... The amount of times they're both looking for each other. Sonny's always looking for that reverse ball to Udogie going inside. And there was one moment he set him up for a nice chance as well. And he knows his decision-making, Udogie, is really good for a young player, when to tuck in and when to go forward. And in between the two fullbacks, I thought Romero and Van der Ven, we finally got to see them for more than 11 minutes together. And they looked like they played much longer together. I love the fact that Romero has kind of taken on the role as the elder statesman, despite the fact that he's only 25. He was dominant. 4 clearances, 3 blocks, 4 recoveries, 1 tackle, 1 interception. Lots of progressive play as well. He played the ball that led to Spurs' second goal. That was him moving forward. He had more touches of the ball, 91, than any other player on the pitch. Only Basuma, 75, and Bruno Fernandes, 77, came anywhere near. And he had the most accurate passes, 66, of any Spurs player on the pitch. I still feel like handing him the vice-captaincy with Maddison was a bit of a masterstroke by Postecoglou. It's just given him that little bit of responsibility. It's having a Spanish speaker, I think, talking to the group of South American players as well with a bit of a leadership voice. And just someone, let's be honest, who could be a bit reckless and lose his head at times. Now he knows that more is expected of him. Postecoglou's called him his most influential defender, and he expects him to act like that as well. And I felt he was quite vocal looking across at him. He was constantly talking to Van der Ven, constantly talking to Porro, and across at Udogie as well. And that's going to be big. I think Van der Ven started a little bit nervously in the noise and the din and all of it as well. But I felt like, huge credit to him as a 22-year-old. I felt he really settled and grew into the game as it wore on. He had a couple of dribbles past players, which I really felt played its part in that. Because, I've heard, was it Tim Sherwood? I can't remember who it was. Someone saying about him being wooden and this big kind of, almost like making out it was like a donkey of a player. I haven't seen that. He's a big lad, but he's a fast lad and he's agile. And, he was jinking away from these United nippy attackers like he was just as agile as them. So I didn't get that. I felt, I don't know. Sometimes I think almost people will just say something for the sake of having an opinion on something. Maybe it's no different to me. I have to do these videos, so I will sometimes say stuff perhaps for the sake of it rather than carefully thinking it out or in the moment. But I just feel like with Van der Ven, again, such a tiny sample size. I think he's done well so far. And he loves Postecoglou again. He calls him the trainer. His quotes after games of Spurs play, I love this style of football, to be honest. I love to play with the ball because the trainer gives us the trust to play with the ball. It's not that when we have the ball, the trainer is screaming from the side to play it long. Every time we have the ball, you can hear him saying, keep calm, just keep playing. And with the high line with Kuti, with me, with Pedro and Destiny, we know the time to go back because we trained for this the whole week. Of course, we take some risks, but what is football without risks? Oh, Postecoglou must have heard that phrase and just gone, my man, that's exactly why I've brought you in. What is football without risks? Absolutely. We've been just treated to such risk-free football in recent seasons. And yeah, this is the anti-risk-free football, if you see what I mean. And it's not even just the younger players. Experienced heads feel like they're buying into it as well. Spurs' second goal, 34-year-old Ivan Perisic trapping Maddison's pass so well. Maddison's pass was lovely, but honestly, watch the control. Perisic, he just kills it stone dead. Plays the ball to Ben Davies, 30-year-old Ben Davies, who I think we maybe have to praise more Davies for the run, which was a lovely run, kind of came in unnoticed, a bit like Sarr's run. The contact with the ball was not the greatest, but in a weird way, maybe if he connected better with it, it's one of those where the keeper had saved. But because he kind of scuffed it, it ends up hitting Martinez and it goes in for an own goal. So, Davies, I didn't realise actually, he kind of put it out on his social media. He's become a dad for the first time recently. A little boy called Ralph, he was there. There's a lovely little photo of him putting him on the pitch after the game. Again, you sometimes don't realise what players are going through behind the scenes, becoming a new dad and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it just showed that he's got the movement to be able to kind of get forward as an attacking fullback in the Postecoglou system as well. And I think it's just more proof that he can be an absolutely fine squad member. I think people are always too harsh on Ben Davies. you'll always hear me defend Ben Davies because I just feel he gets lumped into this category of, the players that are part of the problem that people say. I don't think Ben Davies is part of any problem ever. Yes, he'll have the odd game where he gets beaten for pace. Yes, he'll have the odd game where if he's in the centre-back, he'll get beaten for height. But I think Ben Davies is someone you always want within your squad. And I think he will be a shining example, someone like Destiny Udogie, as they kind of rotate, I'd imagine Destiny Udogie has got every chance without European football of really making the spot his own. But having Ben Davies as someone there as a bit of a mentor figure is no bad thing at all. And someone that can come in as a solid replacement if need be as well. It's no coincidence that every manager has loved Ben Davies. It's not he's a guy that is just going to be there, whatever. These managers don't have to play these players and pick them. Nobody makes them do it, whatever, regardless of what people might think. That's my little mini Ben Davies rant I have once every 2 to 3 months. It's now a case of tweaking the remainder of the squad and making some wholesale departures as well in these final 12 days of the transfer window. Because there's we know there's areas, and Postecoglou said that himself. I think in a press conference on Friday, he pretty much said about how there's areas in defence, midfield and attack that they can upgrade on as well. So I would keep an eye on what happens, because I kind of get the feeling that Spurs have got a number of deals lined up, ready to go if they can get the players out of the squad first. And I think people are kind of misunderstanding slightly the getting players out of the squad thing. It's not that... it may be, but I don't believe it's financial based. Like I said, they still are going to do my weekly check. They still haven't taken that £50 million. No, still haven't. So, by the way, I'm not looking at the bank account. You can look on Companies House and it says they have to file a document if they do it. So that money is there to buy a player. It is genuinely because there are so many players in the squad that they can't register at the moment. It's almost... Well, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. I just want to very quickly talk about the attackers, because that is an area I think we need to see some kind of incoming, but maybe not in the way that we expect. And I feel like Postecoglou has been hinting strongly at this as well. So very quickly on the players that played up front. Sonny, I felt it was very much a captain's performance. It was very much an experienced player's performance. Guidance to the young players. Didn't quite have the devastating end product we know that Sonny can bring, but I really felt he was quite kind of a nurturing performance to those around him. Like I say, Doggy especially, Sarr as well. I still don't think he's hit his stride, but he is, again, a clever move given him the captaincy. I think it's brought out another level to his game as well. And he's got some quotes from him as well, and about just how much he loves playing in Postecoglou's side. I think you can see the last 2 games. It's very early, but we want to have the ball, create chances, play attacking football. If we lose the ball, we're going to be counter-pressing. It's really, really fun, even to play in. But I think watching this game is even more enjoyable for the Spurs fans. 100% it's enjoyable for the players, for the attacking players. I don't know about the defenders, but for me, it's playing high, pressing high. It's an easier job than running 70 metres behind. Every manager is different, and every manager I will always respect, and if you give me any role I will do it. I'm very, very happy, obviously, but as an attacking player, when you play in their half of the pitch pressing, when you win the ball, the distance is shorter to the goal than when you're in your box. I'm really liking it. You don't have to really read between the lines there. We know that Sonny, we know all the attackers at Spurs were having to do a lot of defensive work, and Decky's about to kind of refer to it in a quote I'm going to use from him as well. And it just puts the players in the best positions where they can do their best work. And I think Sonny is benefiting from that. And I'm pretty sure the goals are going to start to flow for him quite quickly as well, with the belief that will be running through Spurs as well now. And that will be the most interesting thing, is the byproduct of this victory. In terms of Dejan Kulusevski, I felt, again, a bit like Brentford, he grew into the game. Maybe early on was struggling a little bit to really make an impact with his decision making, but I did feel he kind of grew into the game, and it was his deflected cross that made its way to Sarr to fire home. He's still not quite at his best yet. I still think he's doing this thing where he's taking lots of low shots at goal. You know, we've been used to him. How do I put this? Doing a he kind of cuts inside and he'll do a curling shot into the top corner. That's kind of what he's known for. When he's in a little bit more of a play it safe mode, he does these low shots, and they're often into the keeper's arms, are quite central. And I think when he can get that out of his head, I think he'll maybe just needs one to ping in the top corner, and that's all it needs. But he also spoke about Kulusevski and how his roles changed. He said, I don't have to be a wing-back when we're defending, so I'm enjoying it a lot. I learn a lot of things every day. Again, another player put in the right position for him. On his performance against Man U, he said, I had a good game. I just need to score, that is all. I just need to score and try to find the right pass. I think that is the only thing that is missing in my game right now. We have to all do it. The more people that score, we're going to need to, because we don't have those 30 goals from Harry. He probably watched for sure. I think that must have been said in the mix. I think it said the Irish News or something had those quotes, but I imagine it was something that he said in the mix zone. And to be honest, Sonny and Decky at the moment have got good backups as well. You've got Perisic and Manor Solomon. Both showed in their little cameos what they can bring in different ways. I felt Perisic, his delivery is just so good. And, you know, I've said to you before that he feels like with Postecoglou, he can win stuff. And he feels that he spoke to Juranovic, who used to be at Celtic, with Postecoglou, and he's raved about him. And there's kind of a real feeling like he was going to head out the club. And now it's feel like, well, maybe not. You know, obviously you'll see what late offers come in, but certainly Postecoglou, and I asked about Perisic, seems to want to keep him, and Perisic seems to want to stay. So, you know, why not? Because I do think he's a very good player to be able to bring into matches. And I thought Manor Solomon showed the other side, or a different kind of attacking player that can come on with his fast feet. There was one just little lovely moment on the touchline where he beat a man, and it just shows you what he can bring. He needs to bring end product. If anything, if you could merge together Perisic and Manor Solomon's abilities, you would have this wonder player. But again, it's about learning from each other. And in terms of if Solomon can learn from Perisic about his delivery, then you get the end product. So, yeah, I do think they've actually got some good options. Obviously, you've got Brian Hill to come back as well from his injury as well. So I think the issue obviously does still at the moment lie in the centre of attack. Richarlison, there's no faulting his work rate. Absolutely not. His willingness to run, he tries to hold up the ball, which he did a few times well. But I just think to end a home game with Spurs having 17 shots at goal and not a single one of them came from Richarlison, I guess it shows a lack of confidence, maybe a lack of ability to get into the right areas, but he would probably argue people not picking out his runs and finding him. I guess the attackers have now got to get used to finding him in different areas than they've been used to trying to find Harry, who would come a bit deeper and maybe was more obvious to find. I don't know. And Richarlison maybe needs to learn to go on different kind of runs and different movement to become more of a central, prolific striker type than the roles he's been playing before. Because, you know, he touched the ball just 28 times, and that's less than any other Spurs player in the starting lineup. Only Mason Mount, 27, and Garnacho, 25, touched it less in their starting lineup of United. Look, we're all naturally going to think, oh, what would Kane be like in that system? And genuinely, I've said it before, of course he would have scored goals galore. It would have been a slightly different system because of the way he plays, but yeah, we've got to look beyond Harry Kane now. Harry Kane was incredible. Harry Kane was one of the greatest players I've ever seen pull on a Tottenham Hotspur shirt. But ultimately, he is now a Bayern Munich player. And yeah, Spurs have kind of got to look to what comes next with them now. And I think for Richarlison, he's got to prove now this is his time. This is his chance to show what he can do. He needs to kind of show he can be a bit like Kyogo at Celtic and become a real, not only a sacrificial lamb in a way for the team, but also mop up whatever chances come their way. Be more prolific. Richarlison's reached double figures, I think it's 3 times for Everton in a season. I think it was 13 goals in two 10-goal seasons, or maybe it was 2 13-goal seasons and one 10-goal season. And maybe that's most of that was spent as a wide man rather than a central striker as well. So he's got to learn to kind of be more like he is, I guess, as Brazil's number 9. It could just be he needs something to click for him. A little bit of confidence. And the burden, obviously, of being a £60 million striker as well that's been brought in. And actually, there was some quotes that popped up today. He was speaking to ESPN Brazil. He said, during the training, I've been scoring goals. I think it is just a matter of time for the goals. I think the fans have to be a little patient. It's not easy to replace an idol like Harry Kane. Like it or not, a match in which I don't score a goal, they're going to miss him. He is a guy who scored more than 200 goals for the club. It is taking that as an example and trying to score as many goals as possible in a Tottenham shirt. For sure, that is why Tottenham paid dearly for me. That is why they put me here. Now it is up to me. I have to do the job. I know my responsibility. So he gets it. He gets it. And I do feel like it will come for him. He just needs to. I think he'll go on a bit of a streak. Not like naked around the pitch. But he will hopefully score some goals. And it will come in a bit of a run. Because again, once he gets used to this system and how to play within it, it will naturally create a lot of chances. And I think Sonny and Decky have got a part to play as well in creating more for him as well. And I feel like almost like Maddison's the main one that's been looking for him in games. And that will change. And actually, Richarlison, as he always is, was thoroughly fed up when he came off. Not happy at all. And he was asked about that. He said, it was more with myself because I didn't get any balls there to shoot. I have to receive the ball. I have to be close to the goal. I didn't receive any ball there. So I was more upset about that. It wasn't for the substitution or anything. I still feel he needs competition. I think Sonny will provide internal competition because we saw when Richarlison came off, Sonny went through the centre. And Postecoglou said that will be something that happens. I just feel like Spurs could do with another attacking option up there. I still, like I say, I get this feeling maybe it's not going to be a number 9. Obviously, there were Lukaku links that Spurs very quickly distanced themselves with. Vlahovic has always been linked with Spurs. But I do just wonder whether maybe I said Pochettino. So close to so many times saying Pochettino instead of Postecoglou. And I think it's because I watched the game earlier, the Chelsea game, it's putting back in my head. But Postecoglou, I think I get the impression he probably sees Richarlison as deserving of that chance and fitting his. I think he sees him as a perfect fit for his idea of football, and he will give him every opportunity to prove that. And then Sonny you've got as a backup, and he has constantly said it. We're all kind of thinking, well, surely he's going to sign a new striker, but you know, it depends what kind of striker, and I think that's maybe the key element to it. Jota already set to leave Al Ittihad just after 1 month. That's a strange one. Sorry, just stuff popping up there on various feeds and timelines next to me. I mean, looking at what they've got there at the moment, other than Richarlison and Sonny, you've got Allegio Velis, obviously. There's some kind of suggestions that he hadn't got his work permit yet. He did. He got it 24 hours after he joined with Mickey van der Ven. I think it was on the Wednesday. They joined on the Tuesday. Postecoglou's already said he's not going to get minutes in his first half of the season. He's going to be very much told to focus, adapt, settle. The guy's 19 years old, coming over from another part of the world. And I think it's quite smart really, in terms of it just says to Velis, you work away. You get yourself ready. And when I feel that you're ready to go out there, we'll put you out there. Be patient. You're not in the glare. Yeah, you cost whatever it was, about 15 million pounds. I'm not going to shove you out there. People aren't going to have expectations of you. You're going to be able to work at your own pace. And when you're ready, don't worry. You'll get your chance. I quite like that aspect. I think obviously some fans will call for him, especially if Richarlison doesn't score goals. But I think that's quite a clever way of doing it. I asked about Dane Scarlett on Friday. Postecoglou said he really likes him. He said he'd been really impressed since he came back from his injury that he had. He said he really likes him. He's going to make a decision this week on whether he stays with the group or goes out on another loan. He's got to decide really what's going to be best for him. Troy Parrott, as we said previously, he's got no squad number. He hasn't been given one. He will be loaned out. Bundesliga clubs and Eredivisie clubs interested in him. And I get the impression we're going to see some movement on that this week with Troy. And then there's in terms of incoming ones, it's very much, we know some of the standout names. I think there'll be some that we're not aware of, but obviously Gift Orban is high on the list. It's a lot of database stuff coming through at Spurs at the moment. A lot of that kind of led by Leonardo Gabbanini with Postecoglou and Levy. From what I understand, that's quite a good little triangle that's forming between Postecoglou and Gabbanini and Levy in terms of kind of really pushing this more data analyst side of the transfers. And obviously all of it's very early days, but it feels like we've had a higher hit rate in the early games from the new signings. They've all kind of stepped in and done the job quite quickly. So, we'll see. Obviously, like I say, Valise is a bit different. He's one for the future. But in terms of Gift Orban, we know he's one they like. He is one of the kind of the young talents out there on the continent, and he'd be one that those who kind of cover the Belgian game say that he wouldn't be ready yet to be a constant starter in the Premier League, but probably could do a job coming in and out from the bench. And he's very obviously he's got speed, he's got finishing ability as well. And the reason I said earlier about maybe they're not looking at just a traditional big number 9 type. Funnily enough, there's the feeling that Valise could be that. He's quite a big lad. But when it comes to someone like Orban, Gift Orban is one of the things people say about him. His strength and physique are probably not stronger parts of his game. They are areas where he will get knocked off the ball. It's something he would need to work on hugely for the English game, and his awareness of teammates as well. People say that's one thing. He is very focused on scoring the goals, but obviously he's not going to be a real assists man. I mean, last year, can't argue with his goal count. 20 goals in 22 games for Ghent, 5 in the Conference League, but just 2 assists in all of those games. And this season so far, 5 goals in 5 matches, no assists. He's all round. I mean, he's only 21. It's very much a work in progress. Of course he is. But I just wonder whether it's one of these where he's such a raw talent that maybe if there's interest from him in coming to Spurs, and Spurs clearly have an interest in him, that maybe it's a bit like an Udogie, a bit like a Sarr kind of move, a bit like a Van de Ven to a degree as well, of getting in there before other clubs get him, because he has the potential to be a real star, and making that move for him. But like I say, I think if people are expecting him to be a number 9 type that will fulfil the same role as a Richarlison, that's not really what he is. He can be developed maybe into that role, but certainly isn't at the moment. And the same applies for Brennan Johnson at Nottingham Forest. He's got loads of admirers at Tottenham. Obviously, will cost more. He will cost certainly more than Gift Orban will. And again, he probably plays more out wide. Can play centrally, but plays more out wide. But yeah, keep an eye on Brennan Johnson links as well. I know Paratici was a big fan of his as well. Obviously still involved in his consultancy role at Spurs. So yeah, I'd be intrigued to see. Like I said, I just get this feeling that as soon as they can get players out the door, they'll start moving on some of these targets that they have probably been slightly trying to set up in the background, whether it be with agents with the agreeing terms for the players, and then moving quickly with the clubs after, because time's running out. And this is the issue with the players going out the door. Sorry, I was going to tell you about the numbers, wasn't I? So, Postecoglou knows it. He keeps saying it. And there's this thing among fans, and sometimes we as journalists say the same thing of like, oh, just get him out the door. Just get him out the door. And there's this lovely thing that we all often come up with, like, oh, chuck him in with a deal for thingy. Chuck Spencer and Don Bele in for player X, and yeah, great. Those kind of swap deals just don't happen. It's like, even in like games, like when you try and do things like Football Manager, it doesn't really work. It certainly is very, very rare in real life. But also just this idea of get them out the club. What I think you can always argue about with Spurs is you can certainly say the recruitment maybe has been poor in the past. The recruitment has been a mishmash because of the messy style of different kinds of managers. So you're creating this blended mishmash of a squad. But I think to kind of, there's two sides to this, isn't it? There's one aspect of fans will say, just get them out for any price. But then there's other fans that will maybe not be happy if Spurs haven't got the funds to go for someone. But then it's because maybe they're signing a £60 million on Ndombele, and then they're maybe letting him go for, I don't know, 10, 15 million, which is just ridiculous. But that's a whole other thing. But ultimately, there's also another aspect to having such a big squad and why it needs to be fixed. Sorry, that's where I was heading with that. I remember now. Some people I've seen say, well, just get the players in and then sort out the other stuff afterwards. That's kind of what Spurs can't do at the moment because, and this is why, because I've got the numbers here. And actually, Postecoglou said this week about having such a huge squad is also problematic in training as well. It makes it really difficult in who you can work with, how you can work with the team, how you can set up different kind of things because there's almost too many players to be dealing with. And also you've got the natural kind of morale element of players who either aren't buying in fully to the different kind of football or have their head elsewhere because they want to move to another club. But even more so than that, it's simple registration issues that I think we maybe overlook. Because obviously we've had Australian football, European football taken out of the equation. So you don't have to worry about homegrown blah blah for that, but you still do for the Premier League. So if you're not aware, Postecoglou's got 20 foreign players. That's 3 over the limit. You're only allowed 17 foreign players. And in total, this is another issue as well. People talk about the homegrown aspect. It's not so much that. They've got a lot of homegrown players. But it's the total number of players aged over 21. Spurs have got 31 players aged over 21 in and around the first team. They can only register 25. So immediately, that's 6 players over 21 who cannot be registered in the Premier League now. That's without bringing anyone else in. Anyone who's under 21 can go on this separate list. So ironically, someone like a Gift Orban could actually come in and go on the under 21 list. So that means that you'd need to get 6. If you've got 25, you can register. You've got 31 in total over 21. That means 6 players have to leave or be left out. And that's without bringing anyone else in. So imagine how many you have to actually get out of the squad for other players to come in. And like I said, he's already said he wants to upgrade the squad in defence, midfield and attack. And he told me very clearly he wants another centre-back. Obviously, we know the likes of Torino's Per Shaw's have been linked, as has Tosin Adebayo at Fulham as well, and various other players across the continent will also be on their list. So you kind of got to look at then who can head out the door to start freeing up these spaces. So Harvey White, along with Troy Parrott. Harvey White hasn't been given a squad number as well, so he will head off. Lloris, I think the Spurs are just kind of waiting for him to settle on a club where I think he wants to be the number one somewhere, and the ability to be a number one in many clubs maybe isn't there at the moment. So obviously Hugo Lloris has to head out the club. He's no longer the club captain. Sonny is the club captain, so there's kind of almost no role for him now. Vicario is a new number one. Forster is his backup. Jed Spence, Spurs will listen to any offers for Jed Spence. He's absolutely has failed to impress Postecoglou. He's not going to play this season unless there's injuries. The only interest really thus far has mainly come from the Championship for Jed. And then I guess it's up to him whether he takes a step down to the league below. I think Spurs have to accept a loan because I don't think they're going to get a fee anywhere near what they paid for him right now. You have to maybe just get a loan, do well in the Championship, build himself back up. I guess this will be a good test really, is whether Jed is just comfortable sitting around at a Premier League club or whether he, not playing, or whether he will be happy to go back to Championship and I guess kind of reboot, start again, and show everyone what he can do. Because I think the worst thing for his career right now would be just to sit there content with being on a good contract for a young player at Spurs, as I'm sure, that's the thing with Premier League wages. This is another aspect of trying to get rid of players, is that a lot of these foreign clubs can't match what clubs in the Premier League pay their players. So yeah, we shall see what happens with Jed. We know about Tonga and Ndombele. I ranted away last week about him and how Postecoglou is really unimpressed with his attitude, application and timekeeping. It's a case of getting him out the door, whether that ends up being, we know the Turkish clubs, there's a couple that are interested in whether he does decide that he's happy to go there, whether, I don't know, maybe a club back in France looks at him. Spurs have got a good relationship with Rennes. Maybe heads up to Rennes perhaps. I don't know. We'll see what happens with him, but something has to happen with him, he needs to just get his career somewhere back on track. Eric Dyer, like I said, sitting watching the game with Delhi. Eric Dyer, we said before, wants to stay and fight for his place, but is there a place for him to fight for? Does he fit the Postecoglou system at all? Davinson Sanchez is a bit above him in the pecking order right now, and I think deservedly so in terms of his recent performances. And I just feel like with Dyer's contract heading towards its close, last 11 months he's in now, are Spurs really going to want him to stick around and just see it out and leave on a free? I mean, he may well decide otherwise, but does that do him any favours? Don't know. And, talking about Davinson, again, his performances and his pace do make him a more natural fit for the Postecoglou system. But once again, his contract heading towards its end, if Spurs get in a decent bid, as they got from Spartak Moscow, they're likely to accept it. And then there's a decision to be made there. Sergio Reguilon is interested in Spain. I just feel with all these players as well, we talk about players heading out the door. I think a lot of clubs are aware Spurs need to get rid of these players. So there's going to be a lot of these clubs, I think, are just going to sit and hold out towards the end of the window, wait till Spurs are really desperate and just put in a bit of a naff loan move with maybe an option to buy. And it's just the way Spurs, unfortunately, always struggle here. Just not good at all. Not good at all. It really isn't. Sorry, I was just thinking more about the Jota thing, whether there's any actual chance of him coming to Spurs. Very strange if he was to leave this quickly. But certainly he's a player that knows the Postecoglou game. And certainly whether he can step... I was trying to think if he was one of the players. No, I think you remember I said in the video, I spoke to a few people that report on Celtic, and I actually didn't mention Jota as one of the players they felt could step up. But, who knows? You never know until you see him in there. But, sorry, back to that. So, Reguilon, clubs in Spain, there seems to be a bit of interest there. So maybe he's one that can be moved on sooner rather than later. You'd expect maybe on a loan, get his value up, maybe get an option in there. Japhet Tanganga, there's talk certainly of Luton Town being interested in him, and also because his agent is Italian, so I think there's always Italian links with Japhet, and maybe he heads there. I think Spurs would probably just like to sell Japhet now, let him go off and have his career rather than a loan move. I'm trying to think, his up maybe 2025, his contract, I'm trying to think. Then obviously you've got Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. He's out of the team. Came in obviously and it did okay, I felt, when he came in against Man U. It's interesting because obviously he was quite an important player for Spurs, but now the Postecoglou system doesn't really desperately need him. So if he wants to move on and get Champions League football somewhere, then obviously that opens the door for it as long as the bid. I still think for Højbjerg, who's one of the better players, and I know people have kind of decided they're going to hate on Højbjerg, but I think inside the Premier League and outside the Premier League, he's probably seen as a very, very good Premier League midfielder. And I think price-wise should reflect that with 2 years left in his contract. I think Spurs should be able to ask for a fair bit for him as well. So looking at all of that, that's 9 players that I've mentioned there. If you could get all 9 of those players out, that would clear the space for 3 more new faces in that squad, and even more technically if you brought Orban in as well, because he's 21. And then could go on the under-21 list. But again, that's 9 players out of a club. Could that happen? That's a busy 12 days, including kind of people coming in the door as well. It's almost like a bit, like I say, football manager scenario. Is it too many players in and out? And also, you've got the other aspect of, if you let Sanchez, Dyer and Tanganga all head out, you'd probably need to bring in 2 centre-backs as well. New centre-backs. Unless, let's say, I don't know, like Schürrle came in, and then maybe whether you felt like, or Postecoglou felt Davies and even young Ashley Phillips could maybe cover as the 4th option. But, like I say, getting rid of all 3 of those only really leaves you with Romero van der Ven, and then the new defender who was coming in to cover that, and then Davies / Ashley Phillips. That's quite an ask. I think you probably would need 4 natural older experienced defenders there in case of, because you have 2 injuries and suddenly Ben Davies is playing in central defence as a shorter centre back, not natural, or Ashley Phillips as an 18-year-old. He made his debut for the under-21s. Wayne Bennett's team smashing in the goals. Very strong team. They beat Newcastle 4-1. They won their first one 5-0 as well. So they've started well in the new season. But what I would definitely stress, whatever happens in the transfer window, do not make the mistake of thinking anyone other than Postecoglou is in full control of who will make the final cut in his squad when the window closes. Is it Dave Jones, the Sky guy? And he didn't mean it in a disrespectful way. He kind of just asked, will it be you that will have the final say on transfers in your squad? And he just looked at him and laughed like, yeah, mate. Yeah. I wouldn't let anyone else decide. And he kind of had this menacing grin on him when he said it. He said, I think it's really important wherever I've been, that's the bits I will never let anyone else control. They've got to be my decisions. I see the game through my eyes. Others may not, but what I see in a player, maybe others don't. That's not a judgment on anyone else. Certain players will fit a certain kind of football. With Biss and Pape, for example, I think it's Pap, actually. I see the energy and the quality they have to break lines, to be really progressive with their passing and their running and those kind of things, so I know they're a good fit. Again, they've got to be coachable, and you don't know that until you work with them, and so far they've been great. And you wonder whether the coachable stuff, whether that's a little pop at anyone else within his squad. But yeah, I do think the fact that the Postecoglou first season will have no European football, despite the fact that I would love European football, I think it kind of lends itself very helpfully to him to have these full weeks of drilling his methods into the players. He's going to have full weeks most weeks for the weekend game. And, I think a lot of the pundits have kind of underestimated them, and that's what Postecoglou loves. And I think you will see them with these 3 weeks suddenly becoming very, very, very good very quickly. And, even in the first home game was probably ahead of expectations for Postecoglou as well, and he still wasn't happy with it. And I just think what it maybe meant was more important for him, that it was a big dollop of proof, I guess, for the players that his system works, believe in it, because you're going to have big games like that. But it's also, and performances, and with the swagger and style they played with. And also, I think a big dollop of proof for the hierarchy to back him, to give him the players that he says he needs. Because look, this is what you're going to get, and the fans are going to love it. You're going to bring the fans back on side again as well. Because, no mistake about it, Daniel Levy has landed a gem in his hands in Postecoglou. He absolutely has. He's been a gem that very much has been pushed towards him, you feel, by CAA Base, the very powerful agency who kind of has such a strong presence at Spurs now. They've got Postecoglou, they've got Son, Maddison, Richarlison, Porro. They signed up Pat Matassar last month as well. And not even that, you look in the academy, they represent some of the brightest talents in the academy. They've got Dane Scarlett, Alfie Devine, Jamie Donnelly, George Abbott, Iago Santiago, among others as well. And like I say, Levy's always kind of placed a lot of trust in Base. They've always been quite close to Spurs. And let's be honest, it's a relationship that has borne fruit with Postecoglou. If Postecoglou is the best thing, I think Sonny would probably be seen as the best thing that's come out of that relationship so far. Although, to be fair, he wasn't with Base. He signed with them a couple of years ago, I think. So, yeah, you could argue Postecoglou is the best thing that's come from Base to Tottenham, maybe. But who knows? Maddison could end up being a superstar as well. Like I say, so you've got the Base angle, and you've got players like maybe Eze at Palace, that obviously is another Base player. Could that be easier because of them? I think Palace would have a big thing to say about that. And like I say, this little kind of triangle between Postecoglou, Gabbanini and Levy is going to be interesting to see what that brings up this summer as well, and the remainder of it. But for now, Levy must be loving the fact that he's got a figurehead again that I guess can stand in front and shield, I suppose, the focus away or distract people away from some of the decisions that have been a bit messy, to say the least, in recent years. And the fact that he's been able to pull the fan base together with not only his words, but now the football. And that's what he's always said, that hopefully the fans will see in my football that I'm not just spouting this for the sake of it. They'll see why I do what I do and what I want football to be. He's absolutely breathed fresh life into a club. But let's be honest, it was so deflated, it was fatigued. We all were. The fans have grown weary of paying the high cost to watch games that have only become higher. Games that were depressing, dull and predictable. Let's be honest, it's only the loyalty of fans that's kept them coming through the turnstiles as well, paying their hard-earned cash each week as well. But now, maybe we can see a way forward. Maybe you can see little sprouts, as Postecoglou calls them, of growth, something being sown by Postecoglou, and a football that, let's be honest, belongs in the grand traditions of how Spurs have meant to play football. You know, the Bill Nick side, the double winning side, the Arthur Rowe push and run before that, the need to just get forward and play wonderful football. You know, the likes of Hoddle would thrive in, Gaza would thrive in, and it just feels like Postecoglou and Spurs are such a brilliant fit, and they really can be. And yeah, I just love that moment. I'll keep going back to it, of him just standing there alone in the centre circle, just looking around, looking at his new home, and just kind of realising maybe how comfortable that fit is, and how well both he and Spurs fit each other. And probably say Spurs, I think, need Postecoglou more than he needs them. But then again, maybe he does need them. Maybe he does need them at this stage in his career, and it's the logical next step for him as well. And I feel like Spurs probably fans really would have identified with his clear growing, I'm going to say love. Maybe he does love the club already. I don't know. It's a short amount of time, but certainly the way he looks at the club is the way that the Spurs fans look at the club through their eyes and what they want it to be. And there will be a sense of deja vu, because it will remind them of another manager who certainly felt that way, a certain now Chelsea manager. And let's be honest, Pochettino was the last manager that the Spurs fans truly loved. And he once said, didn't he, that an amazing home needs furniture. And you know, he also spoke about that painful rebuild and maybe the departure of the club's most beloved player. Maybe that is the painful rebuild really, truly, finally beginning under Postecoglou as well. But hey, Postecoglou is a guy that he could lead Spurs through that with a bit of swagger, bit of style, and something that resonates with the fans as well. But maybe the fact that bond is so close so quickly, maybe that will only make the fans' eyes watch closer on what happens above him. And I guess the furniture shopping, we could call it, that goes on above, well, for the Australian, for his home. Let's be honest, the fans are being asked to cough up more out of their own pockets to come and watch matches. If they're going to have to do that, it needs to be for the sake of something special. And that is up to the club, I guess, to match the fans' increased spending with doing the right things themselves in these final 12 days of the transfer window as well. You can't ask the fans to pay out more and then not do more yourselves to make it worth it. So yeah. But overall, let's be honest, that was very exciting. That was a terrific first home game of the season. If Spurs fans can create that atmosphere at the place every week, it's going to feel like the final season at White Hart Lane. Honestly, it had that kind of vibes throughout the game. It was brilliant. Fans were magnificent. But now it's away for a couple of games, Bournemouth and Fulham away. And hopefully the Ange train keeps on chugging away, and everyone keeps loving it and enjoying themselves, and I can enjoy writing and talking about it because, it's so much more fun. And which is why I've now got up to 137 minutes, an hour and 37 minutes talking about it. So, yeah. Right, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of my evening. This is going to go out late now. Just unfortunately I had to film it right at the end of the day. So apologies for anyone that is going to stay up late to watch it. And, yeah. It always takes a little while to upload, but it'll get up there, and maybe you'll watch it in the morning, and hopefully we'll have some more news to talk about, and more, like I say, get the outgoings going, and then the incomings can start rolling in as well. It's very much a balance, and hopefully you now understand why that needs to take place. But I understand the frustration, of course. Right, I think this might be my longest video. Apologies for those who really don't like the longer videos, but I know there's plenty of people that do like them, so there you go. Right, gonna head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later.